Hello, my name is Monica, and I just want to share with you something that I did in order to get into family history work. And I'm somebody who likes to write, so this was a good activity for me. I have a blog online, and it's currently private because I like to blog about personal things, and then I create them into a blog book. So this is my family history blog book, and I didn't go into it thinking that it was going to be a 400-page book. I just knew that I wanted to get involved in family history, and that in order to do that I had to make a project out of it. And so I decided that at the beginning of the year that I was going to start blogging about my family history, and in doing that I would be researching and studying each of the countries that my ancestors came from. So what I did was take my fan chart. So I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and doing family history work is something that's very big in our church. And I come from a long line of pioneer ancestors, and so I have a lot of family that has done family history work in my line. And so I always kind of thought, what is there for me to do as far as family history goes when so much has already been done? And it was kind of over my head. And so I have a fan chart, and it's full, and it goes back many generations. And I just decided I would take pieces of that fan chart and focus on them for one chapter at a time. And so I started with my left side of my chart, which is my Swedish ancestry. And I just started there, and I thought, Swedish ancestry is kind of the most intimidating with their patronymic names. I thought it would be good to start with the hardest side and do what I could and just work myself over to England and the colonies, which seemed a little easier. So I wanted to go all out and not just research how to find family names and add them to family search and take them to the temple, even though that was the main purpose. I decided I wanted to know everything I could about my family history, and that includes the countries that they came from. I wanted to study about the countries and the culture and personality traits and features and diet and the geography and everything that I could, including the history of the country, because I wanted to feel as close as I could to my ancestors and understand what they experienced in their life and what, added to their DNA that they passed down to me. Everything that they experienced and ate and was part of their culture, added to who they were and who I am as a result of them. So I really wanted to dig deep into more than just the genealogy and family history work part of this. I turned it into a study of really the culture that I have come from through all my generations. So that's not something that you would need to do. And, what I'm sharing with you is a fun idea if you are somebody that enjoys writing and researching and putting together projects or making a project out of something that you want to study. For me, if I want to learn something, then I teach a class, because that's going to help me really dig into it and understand it better than I could if I just studied it. But if I put together the work to teach it, then I understand it way more deeply. And so that was kind of what I wanted to do here. It ended up being a book that I could share with my family, and teach them about family history for those who don't want to do something like this themselves. And so this is kind of like a legacy that I wanted to create and hand down to my family. So I did other things to go along with this, such as doing my DNA analysis to find out the percentage of my genes that are inherited from different countries and ancestry. So I did that along with this right at the beginning. Just to look at the different chapters and like what I did on each part of it, I'll share a little of that with you. So I would start each chapter. So the chapter is the country, and so I started with Sweden, and I started with my Swedish last name, which is Peterson. And I did a little research into that name and where it came from, which is pretty simple with your patronymic names. Peterson is obviously son of Peter, and so I went back and I actually got to find a whole new line than was listed in Family Search, because somebody had put it in there incorrectly. And I got to reach out to my aunt and get our real pedigree charts and put in the true line with the Petersons and find as far back as that went, which isn't super far, but I was able to find the origination of the first Peter, at least that we know of. And there were Peter and Petters and a few in that line. But it gave me the chance to study patronymic names and where that came from and when that tradition stopped. Anyway, so with each chapter, I took a name from that country that's prominent in our family and did a little study on that. And then also introduced the country, its geography, like the time zone, like Sweden is up in the northern hemisphere, so they have aurora borealis, and they have 6 months of dark winter and 6 months of light summer, and that's just interesting to me that some of my family lived in a place like that. And then I would take the Swedish patriarchal line and the matriarchal line and just kind of follow them back and list names, because there isn't a story for everybody, and I kind of wanted to get familiar with the names in my family line just to know, what are different Swedish names and what can I know about each of these even without a story, and like what age they married at and how many kids they had. Those were just interesting things to me. And then I was blessed to find a story from Sweden. I didn't think there was one, but I ended up finding one from my aunt, I believe. And it's one of the most exciting stories that I found this whole project. And it's about Hannah Jorgensen's conversion to the church, and she was a highly spiritual lady that had revelations and visions from a child, and she had an amazing story of conversion and immigrating to America. So that was really an awesome story to find that I wouldn't have found if I didn't do this project. So yeah, I follow a few different patriarchal, matriarchal lines on her side and her husband's side. And then I get into Swedish family names and language. So I get into like the language of Sweden and gave myself a basic little lesson on how to speak that and what their alphabet is, and how to pronounce some of the names when you understand that. And so that was really interesting to me. So there's a little Swedish language lesson here. And then I go and find the farthest line back and follow that. And then also with listing that farthest line, I also talk about the history and especially like who the rulers and monarchs were, and just some little political stuff, just to understand, like, my ancestors were alive at this time, and this is some piece that we have a connection to. We can know the history and the ruler at that time that my ancestors lived and what was going on politically. So that was my purpose in putting that in. And then Swedish foods, that's fun. And then, you can do this and then have a little Swedish party with your family and make the food and talk about the cultures and traditions that you learned about. I didn't list that as part of the chapter, but in some of these sections, because I didn't want to make the title really long, I included like some of their cultural traditions and also like what some of the Swedish physical traits are and personality traits and stuff. So that's in here too, even though it's not listed in the chapters. And then dates of note. So my mom has always mentioned that there's a lot of shared birth dates and death dates in our family. And so that made me curious. And so I started searching through our family records for the death and birth dates. And throughout this project, I found a lot of shared dates with a lot of my living family, with our ancestors. And so it was fun to list that, like, you share this birthday with your ancestor, or your ancestor passed away on this day that you were born. So I just go through that. And then with this also, I didn't make a chapter out of that. Maybe I should have, but I did look up some videos on how to do family history, like searching out names, finding names to add to your tree in Swedish records. So I looked up on YouTube some roots text videos on doing that, and I learned that in Sweden that all the records are parish records, which are church records. So if you want to find the records for your family, you just need to look up the closest church that's nearby, and that's where those records are kept. I was able to add a lot of new names through looking at sources that were already attached. So I would see that one name was attached with a record, and then you can get on there and you can say, oh, hey, this other person is listed as being, part of that ceremony. They were there, their name's listed, but they aren't put into the family tree yet. So I was able to add names that way. Or there was even a document in Swedish that gave a little biography of somebody that listed some other names that they were related to. And I put that through Google Translate and was able to understand it and find some names to add. So that was, a main part of this, and I actually found it to be really enjoyable to work with the patronymic names, and that surprised me because I thought it was the most challenging and overwhelming, but it was really fun to see how the families connected with first names becoming last names and going down like that. So then I put in a conclusion and just what I was excited to learn, what I found through my research of that country and my family stories and how to do family history and record matching and all of that stuff. So that is just my chapter 1 on Sweden. I have Ireland, I have Germany, England, and American colonies. Those are my main chapters, but they are quite long. When I had several different sections, like I had England in a lot of different part of my fan chart, so I would do like chapter 5A, chapter 5B, chapter 5C, chapter 5D, and go into each of those sections of England. Anyway, so that's what I did, and all of my chapters are, follow a similar way of studying that country, and a few of them are a little different. And then towards the end, as we get into Utah and also Idaho and Oregon and other close by states, I looked at putting my own family in there, and each of us that were born in one of those states or died in one of those states, and where my family is buried in all the cemeteries in each of these states. And those are things I didn't know, but now having added those, I know that I can go look for the graves of some of my ancestors, including ones that I have stories for, and I can go and find their graves at the cemeteries that they're at. So that's all pretty exciting. I used the site Blog to print this, and sadly that site has gone out of business, which I'm very sad, because it's one of the only ones I've found that will print giant books like this at a decent price. And all the others are pretty expensive just for, well, they're similar prices for just smaller books. So what I would recommend, either you don't need to print it, like you can blog it and you can just have this project on your personal blog and you can share the blog with your family. And that's one thing you can do. Otherwise, you can do chapter books, and you can do Sweden and then print your chapter book, and you just have a printout of your Swedish ancestry, and then do a chapter book on Germany, on Ireland, and then, it's not all together, but maybe that's an easier way for people to read, because I think sometimes a book like this can get overwhelming and people are like, well, I'll scan through it, but I'm not going to read every page. I've started passing, I actually made an updated copy of this before the company went out of business, so I'm passing one copy around to all my siblings and their families to let them read through it and get what they want out of it and pass it on. But it's a little slow going since it's a giant book. So if this sounds fun to you, just know that this is still something you can do. If anyone knows of a blog printing company that would do giant books at a decent rate, let me know. So for all the ones I've found, mostly just want to print, maybe 100-page books at the most. And so that's all right though. Chapter books are a fun idea that would be a good variation on this. On the front cover though, I have my parents' wedding and my mom's parents and my dad's parents. And on the back, I have my own family, my parents and all my siblings. So that was fun, and it's fun that this blog to print company had a title cover page that had a tree on it. That was really awesome to be able to get a cover like this. So I'm really grateful that blog to print existed when I did this. I did this in 2021 and did a reprint actually just a year and a half ago or so, because that was right before the company was going out of business. So this is my journey, and I learned so much about my family and my ancestors. I loved reading the stories. I loved that there was a story, at least one story, in every section and chapter of my family. I'm excited to say that we had that many family history stories and biographies. And that's because of all the work that my own family has already done. However, there have been more stories found since this has been printed. My great-grandfather's story was found and didn't get to put his story in here. So I could even do another update, and maybe I will end up doing chapter books. We'll see. But this definitely got me the experience that I wanted, because I did really get to know how to do family history work better. And I made one super exciting discovery, which kind of just came out of nowhere because I was searching for the city that one of my German ancestors was from, because I wanted some pictures to add in here of Haina, Germany. And as I was searching for that, I came across a blog that was pure genealogy lines and like generations and generations of family lines just listed on this blog. And it happened to be from my family, which is not a surprise because after a war, there was only like 75 or so people left in the city of Haina. And so, if even that many, might have been less. So it's not a surprise that I would have a genealogy from that city that happens to be my own family's. And it took me 2 weeks to add all of those names to my family tree from that blog. And yeah, some would say that's not a reputable source, but I felt the Spirit of God so strong during those 2 weeks while I was adding those names. So I know that that was something I was led to. That was my most exciting discovery as far as adding names to my tree. And a lot of the work of those people have been done now. And yeah, that was probably my most spiritual, exciting experience of finding names. And I know I was led to that. My most exciting personal experience was reading all of the stories and adding them and just really getting to know my ancestors and what they sacrificed and went through so that I could be here today and I could have the gospel in my life. And I have a love for family history now that I never had before, and it really is contagious. There is a spirit of Elijah, and I know that anyone who chooses to dive into this work will experience that and will get the guidance that they need to further their family tree. It will come if you start, if you put in the focus, if you decide that's what you're going to do. There are angels ready to help and assist you because this work needs to be done. And that's my testimony. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.